Hello and welcome. You're listening to CIH Futures Guide to the Housing Sector. Futures is the Chartered Institute of Housing's network for young professionals in the housing sector. In this podcast series, we introduce and explore key topics and issues facing the sector today and how you can get involved. To find out more about Futures and what the CIH can do for you, you can visit cih.org.
Hello and welcome to the CIH Futures podcast. I am Akshita from CIH Futures Wales or Cymru. In this episode, we're exploring what a day in the life of a green skilled role looks like and discussing the different pathways into sustainability-focused careers in housing with our guests, Jessica Shah, Project Manager, Energy and Decarbonisation, Kefili Council, and Zara Husley-Wormsley, Project Officer, Energy and Decarbonisation, Kefili Council as well. I should say this is a special episode focusing on green skills, which is quite important when it's speak about housing, but also two people working together, so partnership working. First off, tell us about your role and what you usually get up to today. Jessica, I'll start with you.
Our role is to deliver major retrofit and energy efficiency projects across the council's housing stock, helping to improve performance, comfort and sustainability of the residents' homes. Day to day, no 2 days are really the same. We spend time developing projects, managing contracts, working with consultants and contractors, analysing building performance data, engaging with residents and collaborating with colleagues across housing. So quite a varied role, really. Our projects form the major works contracts stream for the department. However, we also advise on smaller maintenance and repairs contracts, making sure that general works such as roof replacements are sequenced alongside energy efficiency measures. Ultimately, people think retrofit is about insulation or solar panels, but for us, it's more about the people. It's about making sure that the investment we put into our homes delivers the greatest possible benefits for residents, whilst also protecting the long-term future of our housing stock.
Alongside delivery, a big part of what we do is securing and managing external funding to enable these programmes, as well as shaping future approaches through pilot projects and innovation. We regularly test new solutions on a small scale before rolling them out more widely, using data and insight to understand what works, what doesn't, and where we can improve. We also contribute to wider research, including working alongside academic partners and industry bodies, helping to build the evidence base around retrofit and decarbonisation in social housing. That might involve sharing learnings from our schemes, analysing performance data, or supporting best practice development across the sector. A lot of our time is therefore spent not just delivering projects, but continuously learning from them, feeding that knowledge back into future design, procurement, and delivery decisions.
Realistically, that means our role touches a bit of everything: strategy, design, funding, delivery, data, research, and resident engagement. You name it, we probably have a hand in it at some point along the way, and that's what keeps it interesting, at least most days anyway.
Brilliant. So I think we spoke a little bit about your role. In fact, a lot of details actually. So tell us about how did you get started in your role? Was there a clear career pathway to follow, or did you find your way into the sector through a different route?
I think probably for me, I knew quite early on that I wanted to work in some sort of sustainability area, although at the time that looked very different. Classically, I was convinced I'd become a marine biologist, mostly because swimming with dolphins every day sounded like a great career. That ended up staying a little bit more of a hobby, and I found my way into architecture instead. During my degree, I became really drawn to older buildings and conservation, not just how they look, but how they work and how they've lasted for a very long time. That naturally led me to specialise in sustainable building conservation during my master's, which is where everything started to come together in a way that felt really right for me. There wasn't really a clear or fixed pathway from there. I moved through a range of mostly public sector built environment and project roles, often working on the more unconventional, slightly different projects, things like an outdoor mental health rehabilitation space for the NHS, built from the materials that we could find locally, but also alongside the patients themselves, or restoring an old mill into a community hub in a very much industry-led area. Each of those experiences shaped how I think about sustainability in practice. I also spent some time studying tropical engineering, which really shifted my perspective on what home means, both structurally and from a lived experience. One of the things that stuck with me was that sustainability and conservation were often more instinctively understood by local communities than by the professionals attempting to protect them. I eventually found my way into housing, and particularly social housing, where I've been for the past few years. That's really where everything has come together, because at its core, it's not just about buildings, it's about the people and their connection to their homes. Our role is really to support that, helping to protect and improve homes so that they last for future generations in a way that works for each household and the individuals within it. So it's safe to say that it certainly was not a direct or clear route, but it's been worth every twist and turn that's come my way to get me where I am today. It's really a rewarding space to be in because you can genuinely see the impact of what you do, not just buildings, but on people's lives. And in terms of what's next, I don't have a completely mapped out plan, which is quite exciting. But it's never really been a straight line anyway. And I know I'll be somewhere in the green or conservation space, which is where I've always felt most like home.
I also come from an architectural background. After graduating, I was keen to apply that knowledge in practice rather than commit to several more years in academia. Like many first-year architecture students, I initially imagined working in a large firm. I was really drawn to architecture visually and loved studying how old and new buildings responded to one another. When it came to graduate roles, I knew that what interested me wasn't necessarily designing ultra-modern buildings. It was understanding existing buildings and how they can be improved. I started my career as a Part 1 architectural assistant, working on residential extensions and conversions across REBA stages 1 to 4. That gave me an early appreciation of how existing buildings can be adapted and how old and new can be carefully brought together at a residential scale. After that, I applied to be an asset surveyor at Caerphilly Council, which gave me my first real exposure to building pathology from a practical perspective, although I soon realised it wasn't quite the right fit for me. At that point, an opportunity came up within Jess's team, so I reached out to have a chat. What was meant to be a quick conversation turned into a 2-hour discussion, and by the end of it, it was clear that the role combined everything I was looking for: the technical side, architecture, project delivery, sustainability, and retrofit. Since joining the team, I've had some fantastic opportunities to develop my skills and broaden my experience. Looking back now, I often think that architecture taught me to see buildings through the eyes of designer, but housing taught me to see them through the eyes of people living in them. I don't think my fascination was ever really about architecture itself. It was about the idea of home. I spent my childhood in Turkey, so moving to the UK gave me a different perspective of what we call the built environment. This big change made me realise that a home is much more than 4 walls and a roof. It's where people build routines, memories, and a sense of belonging. Knowing that the work we do can have such a personal impact on people's lives is really something special. So to sum it all up, and my big rumble, one piece of advice I'd give to young fellow professionals is that don't worry if your career looks like a zigzag rather than a straight line. Every experience teaches you something, and sometimes the path you never planned ends up being exactly where you're meant to be.
Really inspiring from both the speakers, I must say, and I'm sure that the listeners would be inspired as well. It's really, really positive and also gives us a clear message that green skills is so much more than what we think. And just speaking about green skills and sustainability, I feel that it can mean different things when we speak about housing. So what does it mean in the context of your role at Caerphilly Council?
I'd say that sustainability and green skills go beyond just the technical energy improvements. We're talking about taking a holistic, people-centered approach to decarbonisation as opposed to just looking at the buildings. Housing is a key social determinant of health, so retrofit isn't just about reducing carbon and meeting targets. It's about creating healthier and more resilient communities, and that all starts with their homes. Sustainability in our work means that embedding retrofit within a wider placemaking agenda where we can improve not only the environmental performance of the homes, but also contribute to sustainable neighbourhoods, high quality green infrastructure, and long-term community resilience through so many different routes.
I completely agree with that, Jess. It also means responding to real-world challenges such as the climate emergency and cost of living pressures faced by residents. For us, this translates into homes that are more affordable to run, more comfortable, and that support dignity in everyday living. From a skills perspective, though, this requires a blend of technical knowledge, strategic thinking, and stakeholder engagement. It's really about understanding building performance and retrofit measures while ensuring projects deliver meaningful outcomes for residents.
Exactly. I'd say ultimately sustainability in our role is about ensuring that the path to decarbonisation delivers social value as well as environmental impact and improves people's lives whilst contributing to the net zero goals that we are aiming to achieve.
There are lots of questions about training, qualifications, and even knowledge to get started and to make sure that the delivery is done in the right way. So, are there different routes into this type of work?
To be honest, there are qualifications that can help, particularly in areas such as obviously architecture, surveying, construction, engineering, or retrofit. But there isn't one single route into the profession, and that's what makes this sector so interesting. People enter the sector from a wide range of backgrounds and often develop specialist knowledge once they're already in it. What's usually more important is having an interest in sustainability, housing, and the built environment, alongside a willingness to keep learning and adapt as you go. A lot of what you pick up comes from being involved in projects, asking the right questions, and seeing how things work in practice, whether they do go well or whether they don't.
I agree. I mean, in reality, most people don't start out knowing everything about any role. And that definitely applies to retrofit and or decarbonisation. And that's completely fine. It's a space that's constantly evolving, which means everyone is learning all the time, including us. The technical side develops quickly, but so does our understanding of how homes actually perform in real life and how residents interact with them, and more importantly, how they live in them. And that's just as important as any technical knowledge. Retrofit and decarbonisation are evolving rapidly, with funding growing and more investment into the sector. So continuous professional development, as with anything else, is essential, regardless of your background. New guidance technologies and approaches are emerging all the time, and the sector's still in many ways figuring out what best practice looks like for us and for ourselves. So to be able to tell someone what you need to get into the sector would be incredibly hypocritical, because we're sort of fumbling our way through as we're going as well. And that makes it a really exciting place to work. But it also means that you need to be comfortable with change and open to learning as you go, which can be quite a challenge for some, but is also the most rewarding and fun part of the job.
It really is. And we've seen colleagues enter the sector through technical, operational, and residential facing roles, and then develop specialist expertise through qualifications and experience. Over time, those different perspectives become really valuable because retrofit isn't just a technical challenge. It needs people who understand delivery, people who understand residents, and people who can connect those two. A great example is our tenant liaison officer, Chloe, who's currently working towards her retrofit advisor qualification and looking to progress into a more proactive role rather than a reactive one. It's a good example of how people can grow within the sector, building on their existing experience and shaping their own path as their interests develop.
I'd say overall, there isn't a single right way to work in this field or a way to get into it in the first place. It's much more about curiosity, adaptability, and just a genuine interest in improving homes and the outcomes for residents, which sounds cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. If you have that, the technical knowledge can be built over time. And in many ways, that's what keeps the role more interesting, is that you're constantly getting more and more information as you go.
So we spoke about the technical knowledge, the training, but what sort of skills or even like soft interests, perhaps something which people don't realize, do you think can help someone succeed in a green skill role in housing?
Well, I think, like we've just said, there's one of the strengths of the sector is that there's no single route into it. People can come from a wide range of backgrounds. So we've worked alongside colleagues both in the organisation and externally that have backgrounds in housing, construction, architecture, such as ourselves, environmental sciences, social sciences, psychology, community engagement, or building pathology. The list goes on and on. And each discipline brings valuable insights to the bigger picture and to each other role within that bigger picture as well. That said, I'd say that a genuine interest in buildings and how buildings work. So I'd say building physics, but that seems very technical, but just generally how they work and how people work with them is essential. Regardless of your background, if you can understand how a building works or building performs, how heat, moisture, and ventilation interact, even at the most basic level, and how interventions affect the fabric of a building, is fundamental to delivering a successful retrofit and decarbonisation project. Developing an appreciation for building pathology and the causes of issues, such as damp, mould, overheating, heat loss, is particularly important. You don't need to know everything from day one. We certainly didn't, and we're learning as we go. But you do need a willingness to learn and develop that understanding as you go.
Absolutely. I mean, alongside this technical understanding, it's equally important to be interested in the people who live in those homes. Decarbonisation is not just about technologies and carbon reduction. It's really about creating healthier, more comfortable homes and ensuring residents can benefit from the improvements being made. As we've already said, curiosity, adaptability, and willingness to keep learning is really important. The sector is evolving quickly, and the people who tend to succeed are those who can combine even the basic technical knowledge with an understanding of residents' needs and experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say ultimately successful green skill professionals are those who can bridge the gap between buildings and people, combining an understanding of building physics, building pathology, whatever you want to call it, with an appreciation of the social and human factors that influence how homes perform in the real living world.
Brilliant. I think you've summed it really well. In terms of then tips or advice, which people usually look in podcasts, and I'm sure listeners would be really keen listening to this podcast as well. What advice would you give to someone who's just getting started in sustainability or climate related work, but unsure on where to start in housing?
I'd say, well, first of all, don't wait until you feel ready. Most of us didn't start in retrofit knowing everything, and that's fine. Housing needs people with a wide range of skills and experiences, whether your interests are technical, design-based, analytical, or people-focused. There's likely a place for you within the sector.
I couldn't agree more. My advice would be to stay curious and keep learning, take opportunities to understand how buildings work, how residents experience their homes, and how to influence each other. And that applies to homes and to any other building that we encounter in our daily lives. Building physics is incredibly important, but so is understanding people. This also applies in retrofit, understanding whether a deficiency in a dwelling is due to a fabric measure failing or a tenant behaviour is a big part of the job, and that's not always an easy part to make the definition between. I'd also encourage people not to be afraid of taking opportunities that don't seem directly linked to their end goal. That's exactly how I got here, and the same for Zara. Some of the most valuable experiences I've had are from projects that sat either slightly or incredibly outside of my original plans. Most importantly, remember that sustainability, especially in housing, is ultimately about improving people's lives. If that purpose motivates you, you'll find the work incredibly rewarding.
So we started the podcast by saying how you sort of work closely together in the same team. I just want to understand how your role complement each other and what does good partnership working look like in practice when delivering these important projects, impacting people's lives, their homes, delivering sustainability or even green skills projects in housing.
I mean, we're constantly planning ahead. It's not just for our team, but also the wider department and the integration of our work. Even down to our holidays. Last year, we made a calendar of all the bank holidays for the following year, maximised our days off. We've had a very much, you take that, I'll take this approach, because it's rare that we get to have the same time off together. I think one moment that probably sums up how we work together is in meetings, actually. Because I'm someone who naturally talks quite a lot. I ask a lot of questions, I'll put ideas out there, but at the same time, I can really doubt myself. And especially when you're in the room where people can challenge you, it's very easily to suddenly think, have I got something completely wrong? But what's made a huge difference is that it doesn't go unnoticed. There's been moments where Jess has stepped in, not just to take over, but to reinforce the point that I'd made or to put a bit of weight to it. And that's had a massive impact on me. Over time, that's kind of changed how I see myself as well in those situations. Instead of immediately doubting myself or whatever I've just said, I've started to trust my own judgment a lot more because I know that I'm not just being left to figure that out on my own.
Well, that first of all is lovely to hear. And I'm very much happy that that's the environment that I'm fostering within the team. And although I am Zara and the team's manager, I very much see it as a partnership. And that's why I think it works. We are doing incredibly well, delivering fantastic work, working alongside the residents, winning a few awards along the way. But the reason it works is because I really try to stay away from a hierarchy. Yes, I may be steering things, setting direction, managing relationships, but at the same time, I want it to feel like we're in it together because we are. It's so important to me that there's a level of trust where I feel like if Sarah and the team weren't there, I could keep things moving, sure. Maybe not perfectly, but enough to keep things afloat only. The success comes from the team as a whole. And that sort of shared ownership is quite motivating, I think, not just for the team, but for myself as well, and seeing how they all work together. Because you don't feel like you're just doing a job, you feel that you're responsible for the outcome in a bigger way. And it instills a sense of pride in every task that adds up to a successful project, which then really has a knock-on effect to the residents. If we are working well together and everything is positive, even in the dark moments, eventually that translates and makes their lives better on the other end too. So I would say that just being supportive, but not overbearing from my side, and giving each person trust, but also being there, as Sarah said, to back them up and let them know that they're not left on their own at any moment. And just very grateful to have a very, very great team. All of which, as we've outlined throughout the discussion, come from a very different background, very different expertise, but we all come together to make a weird little misfit family that works perfectly together. So it's it's all about partnership. Without partnership, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Oh, brilliant. I think this is something which a lot of people would be looking for as well. Partnership working is such an integral part when we speak about housing. So moving on to our fun segment or rapid fire questions. It's actually my favorite part, but it's really to learn a little bit more about our speakers today, Jessica and Zara as well. So I think my first question to you is, do you prefer site visits or is it the office-based work you like?
Ooh, site visits are one of the best ways to learn as a team and see how designs work in real life. It's a two-way process, really. So what we find on site often shapes the design just as much as the design shapes the work on site. Being there helps you understand the nuances of a building, ask the right questions, and make better decisions for the building together. For me, the best outcomes come from combining good design with practical site experience.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I do love being on site in my steel toe caps and high vis, bossing people about for sure. And while I agree with that, I would also say that an office-based environment is also important, or at least a more collaborative, quieter environment. We're very lucky to have a great open office environment where we collaborate and bounce ideas off of colleagues and other teams that know our housing stock very well. We've got a department of people that have been in the organisation for a very long time, and they have knowledge that we just would not be able to find from any of our databases, both about the properties themselves, the areas, and the people that are living in them. So between the two, between the site visits and we're learning with the contractors and the designers, I'd say, and then also the office-based environment, I'd say that really you need the two to come hand in hand.
I think you're so right. It is really hard to pick one. And I think that's the beauty of hybrid and the importance of both the places. But just speaking about myths, because let's be honest, sustainability, decarbonization, we've got so many misunderstandings, so many myths people get. What's that one myth you've heard from people getting wrong about green jobs in housing? For me, it's about construction. People feel green jobs is just construction. So let's start with Jessica.
I agree. I think you're right. It's people do assume instantly construction, but there's a lot more to it. But I'd say that the one big myth, and I think that's more within the sector than it is sort of with residents and in housing necessarily, is that green jobs are just about carbon and EPC ratings. There's so much more to the work that we do. They are sort of the end goals, and they are almost a tick box at the end. There's far more that needs to be done to get to those points. But it does get reduced to those two words, and that's quite unfortunate for such a fast-paced, quite fun sector because we're learning as we go.
I absolutely agree. I mean, we sit in round tables, don't we? And we hear these from perhaps individuals and we go, no, that is not what you should be measuring success of. In reality, they're just as much about people. A successful retrofit means someone can sit comfortably in their living room in winter without choosing between heating or eating.
I think that sums up so well. It's so much more than construction, so much more than EPC as well. So I think this would really sort of demystify some of the myths. But coming to the important part, tea or coffee, because that really gets us through the day. What do you choose between both of them?
Well, that really depends on the day. So we are definitely a coffee pair when we're out and about. We do like to stop and get ourselves a nice little coffee. But
We do actually have a teapot on our desk.
I think it's a bit debatable when we bring matcha as well, but let's leave that to the other conversation. I think my last fun question is one word to describe your role.
I think I'd have to say multifaceted, and that would be covered very well by all of the different words that I said throughout that just listed all the different tasks and the different areas and the different sectors that come into it.
I think that's a really good word to use, to be honest. For me, it would be purposeful, because everything we do is meaningful. Every decision we make, every intervention, it has an impact on someone, on something, on the building, on people, on communities, everything we do.
Well, that is a wrap, and that is an end to an amazing conversation we've had today for CIH Futures podcast. So I'd like to say a big thank you to our speakers today, Jessica and Zahra from Kefili Council. And thank you to the listeners if this episode has inspired you to explore green skilled careers, which is really, again, more than construction, more than EPC in housing. So you can find more about roles in housing on the CIH website and search for the latest opportunities on CIH Jobs website as well. So thank you for listening and tune into our next podcast on the CIH website or YouTube channel. Thank you.